I wanted to make a brief video today about antennas and what kind of antenna does a person actually need to work HF. There's we'll just say a million companies out there who are willing to sell you something, but will it work for what you actually need? So I'm going to talk about a few of those things here, and then we'll look at some of the antennas that I have put together. So let's just say somebody has gotten their general license, their general ticket, or their extra ticket, and now they're ready to play HF radio. I know I've been in that situation, and there's all kinds of options out there for a person to pick from as far as radios go, and most people today don't build their own radio. But antennas are a different thing. Like I said, there's a lot of people and companies out there who want to sell you an antenna, but can you try before you buy? Before you spend a lot of money, there's a few questions that need to be answered about an HF antenna. So what antenna do I really need? Well, there's a lot of options out there. A lot of them can be made at home. For example, a dipole, and I'll show some examples of what I've made. I've got an assorted collection of things that I've put together, and I'll walk you through my my laboratory, also known as the garage where the wife parks her car, and show you some of the things that I've put together. But so there's all kinds of options. But there's questions to ask about each one. You can pick a dipole. You can pick a vertical. We've got in-fed half waves. You hear a lot about that. Long wire non-resonant antennas. There's Yagi antennas and parasitic arrays that you can look at. There's just all kinds of options out there. But before you start even looking at an antenna, there's one thing I would recommend before an antenna, and whether you buy one or make one, there's something that's important, and you need some type of a antenna analyzer. And I'll show you what I've got right here. We'll go over to my workbench here, and go ahead and be prepared, because once you get into the ham radio thing, you're going to fill up a drawer like this full of all kinds of stuff. So what I use, I have a nano VNA. This is relatively inexpensive. You can get them for about $50, as much as $100, and they don't cost a lot of money, and they work really well. There's also other options out there. There's the Rig Expert, which I do not have, but I think it costs more money. Here's just a glimpse of some of the other things that I have. Power meter, signal detectors, HF power and SWR meter. We collect a lot of things like this, but anyway, that's just that's neither here nor there. But it's what somebody does need. You need some type of antenna analyzer. You need this whether you buy an antenna or make one, because you're going to want to know what your antenna is resonant at. So that's one thing that I would begin with before really even considering getting started. It's an essential tool that you'll be glad you'll have, and you buy it once and it lasts a long time. So we got antenna analyzer. Now let's talk about antennas. There's quite a few antennas that somebody could make, but there's questions that have to be asked when each antenna is considered. First off, as hams, we need to look at what are our working conditions where we're going to be setting up an antenna. How much room do we have in our yard or on a back patio, wherever we plan on installing or placing an antenna? You know, how much room do I have? What is my working condition? And the next thing that is really not talked about very much is, what are you trying to get out of your HF radio? Are you trying to work DX primarily, or are you trying to work local within a few hundred miles? You know, what's your goal? What's your objectives? Because different antennas work better for different things. And I have a previous video about this. Go back and look at it if you're interested. It's called How Much Gain Does a Person Really Need? Facts and Fallacies. Because there's a lot of misconceptions out there regarding antenna gain and such as that. But anyway, so let's say you want to build, and the antennas I'm going to mention here are things that a person can build themselves with minimal supplies and some type of a piece of test equipment, be it a nano VNA or a rig expert or something else that can do antenna analysis, because you need that when you start doing an antenna. But first, let me just start with a dipole. The thing to ask ourselves about a dipole, and here's an example of what I have right here. This is one that I put together with the banana clips. You got one for the center conductor, one side for the shield. You just connect it like that, and you can hook a regular piece of coax into there. So you string this up someplace, somewhere, get this elevated off the ground, and you got a dipole. I also have another one right here using the LDG 1-to-1 balun. This is a dipole that I cut for 40 meters. So if I get this up in the air, it's resonant on 40 meters. This one is resonant on 20, the white one is. So both of those work just fine. But when it comes to a dipole, you have to ask yourself, do you have the space to support a dipole? Because the legs of the dipole have to be spread out. They have to be, I would say, spread out at least in an inverted V, and if possible, spread it out just completely straight out to one side and the other. And also, it's beneficial to get it as high as you can. Now, there's exceptions to that depending on what you want to use it for, but height is might, and it works really good if you can get it high. I have a dipole I made for 20 meters. Let's see if I can find it. Stand by. Okay, here's a dipole that I made that'll work up to 20 meters. It's T made out of PVC with 2 telescopic whip antennas, ends that have a place to screw into the center of this. This works really well, particularly if I can get it up at about 30 feet, the 30 foot mark, 33 foot mark, which is close to a half wavelength for 20 meters. If I can get this antenna that high, it has directionality. I can turn it and point it one broadside one way or the other. And I have worked Europe and the Middle East with this right here. So a dipole will work, but you just have to ask yourself, do I have what I need to support the deployment of a dipole? The space to support one, can you get it high? One other thing that I did with this 40 meter dipole right here, when I initially cut this, I had this one that I laid on top of a wooden fence. It was about 6 foot high, and I only used it for receive. And this was at my previous QTH, and it was an excellent receive only antenna. So I would receive with that, and I would transmit with a vertical because I had such a high noise level at that previous QTH. So what you just have to ask yourself, what's my intentions with the antenna? That was the point that I was trying to make earlier. What do you want to do with it? What's your goal? So that's the dipole. We have vertical antennas, and I'll go outside and show you the one outside in a little bit, but it's about 90 degrees right now, so let's do what we can inside. This one right here, I have a vertical in a bag. The two yellow stakes are ground radials, two ground radials, and the bundle in the middle where my thumb is cut for 40 meters. So I can take this wire in the middle with the red terminal on it, I can take that wire, elevate it to the top of the 12-meter spider beam pole that I have. It leaves me with two elevated radials that I spread apart 180 degrees and drive into the ground, and I've got a dipole in the bag. All I do is connect it to this right here. My coax screws into this black box, and I have a positive and a ground side that the wires connect to. The radials connect to this side right here. The lead with the terminal, it connects right there to the center conductor. And this works real good. I've used this for a long time. That was my primary 40 meter at one time. But that's a vertical in a bag right there. All I have to do is raise the wire there in the center and drive the two radials in the ground, and it's resonant on 40 meters. But when it comes to a vertical, you have to ask yourself something too. Do I have what I need to deploy a vertical? Do I have a place to put down radials? Because it does require radials. Do I have a pole or a tree that I can raise it in? Because you have to have height with your verticals. Can you run elevated radials? Will they be a trip hazard, or will you have to put radials on the ground? If you can run elevated radials, you'll be able to get away with a lot less. But if you have to put radials on the ground, you're going to have to put more. For example, that vertical right there, I only have two elevated radials, and it works just fine. I can work Europe with that. But when I go to ground radials, I have 16 at 16 feet long per radial. So and that tends to work pretty good for me. But that's a question that you have to ask. Can you have elevated radials, or can you do you have to have radials on the ground? Do you have something to elevate the antenna? So that's the vertical right there. What else have we got? We've got an in-fed half wave. That's done using this transformer right here. This one is I think it's a 64-to-1. Somewhere it says it. But anyway, I think this is a 64-to-1 transformer for an in-fed half wave. I use this and this, and if I've got the room, I can put this up. The higher the better. I can put this up, and with this spool of wire right here, I can work up to 80 meters. That was the first reason that I bought the this unan and the wire, was to try to get on 80 meters. But even when I had room to deploy that, still 80 meters was a local band. And it doesn't work as good as the vertical on 40. 40 worked better with the elevated radials, or either radials laying on the ground, than this did right here. So the in-fed half wave works, but the things you have to ask yourself: do you have a place to deploy it? Do you have a a pole to get it up in the air? Do you have a tree to run it into? Do you have some long wire? Do you have what you need to deploy this in-fed half wave? And I mean, it works, it works really well, but it doesn't work as good as some others. And like I said previously, it depends on what are your working conditions where you are. Something else that there is out there that you hear people talking about is long wire non-resonant antennas. And I have done that. I've got a antenna tuner in the backyard that we'll go look at in a minute. But I've ran a 41 foot, I think it was 41 foot, yeah, 41 foot long wire, and it worked okay. But I found out in my case that what works out better is to use a antenna cut for the 40 meter band, and then use the tuner to get it on to 20, because then I have a half wave at 20, essentially what this is doing right here, and it performs better because I run a vertical antenna where I am. One thing I don't have an example of is a Yagi antenna. It's not something that I have the ability to deploy right now because I would need to get it high up in the air, and I just don't have the space for that. Let me show you some other things that I've made here. This right here is the base of a T2LT antenna that I use for 10 meters. If you haven't looked at that before, it's worth looking up because it's something that you can make with some leftover coax and a ferrite core. I've got a previous video on this antenna, and if you look, you wrap your coax around this stops RF. Then the antenna goes up here. Your coax stops right here, and then you have wire going the rest of the way. So essentially what you have is a dipole that you hang vertically. I have had really good success with that T2LT for 10 meters. Last fall, when 10 meters was open, I was at my QTH where I am now, and there's a pileup of people trying to make a contact with this guy in the Western Sahara, and they couldn't get through. And I was listening on my 10 meter ground mounted vertical, and I just could not get through. There was no way I could get through. So what I did, I took this antenna right here, tied it to the top of my 12 meter spider beam, hoisted it up in the air, and I got through first time. I mean, the very first time I threw out my call sign, he answered back. I was just shocked at that. So this T2LT works pretty good. Now I did make one for 20 meters, and I didn't have as much success with that. I did just as well with other antennas. So again, it varies by conditions and your QTH and where you're trying to operate from and things like that. So what else have we got here? UHF. I play around with UHF every now and then, not very much anymore. But this is a J-pole I made out of copper pipe. And the brass bolts on the top let you really narrow down to the frequencies that you want to tune on. I've used this on the ham frequencies for UHF and GMRS. It'll cover from, if I remember right, it'll cover from about 410 to 500 and something megahertz just by adjusting the screws on top. So there's a lot of things that you can do with things that you might have around the house. What else have we got here? Oh, let me show you about this one right here. This red one is something that I made, and what it is this initial wire down here is cut for 20 meters. So I made a 20-meter vertical antenna with that red wire right there. Then I made a coil or choke, whatever you want to call it. Pick what suits you. But this right here lets me work 40 meters with this same thing. So at 20 meters, this blocks off everything above. So I'm using this wire right here for 20, and then when I go to 40, it uses the coil and this extra remaining wire, which is not very long. It's about 3 feet long. You know, you don't have to run another 16 feet of wire to make it work for 40. The coil takes care of a lot of that. But that's something you can make, you know, if you have a little bit of time and a little bit of patience and you have a test set, you can make this. The antennas that you buy out there many times that are multi-band verticals are full of coils just like this. This is something you can make on your own if you have the desire. Now there's nothing wrong with going out and buying one if you don't want to make it, but it's good to understand it's good to understand how this works, so that when you shop around, you know what's going to work. You can guess what's going to work best. And when you do purchase something, the knowledge makes it easier to tune what you've previously purchased. So let's see here. I think that covers about everything that I've got in here. So now let's go outside and talk about what we've got out there. Stand by. Okay, what I'm going to show you out here are things that I have shown previously, but there's a little bit of a twist to some of it. This black pole right here, this is my 12-meter spider beam pole. Currently, I have the top 2 sections removed because I don't need them. And there's a wire on there that I previously had cut for 40 meters. And works really good. I was talking to a guy over in Spain last night on it. And what I had that little black box that you saw previously tied to this point right here. And then the ground went to my ground radials that are buried out in the yard. I have 16 ground radials buried in the yard. But I have since done something different with this. Now I have this connected to this LDG tuner, which I have a video on. I made it recently. You can go back and look at that if you like. So now what I do with this LDG tuner is I run this same piece of wire that's cut for 40 meters, and I use a tuner, and I can work 20 meters and 10 meters with this wire. 20 meters works really well. It gives me a halfway vertical, which has a lower takeoff angle than just a regular ground mounted quarter wave. So I'm really pleased with that. This is something else that I put together. I have quite a few of these telescopic whips right here. I can use this telescopic whip to work anything from 20 meters down to 10, probably down to 6 if I needed to. Just hooks right in here. I put a ferrite core right there. It stops common mode currents. Now, one other thing I can do with this is unscrew this from the base of this PVC, take and screw in, see if I can get it in the camera here, screw this into the base of the PVC right there, and then take the antenna and put the antenna in the top of this. What I get with that is a 40-meter antenna. If this antenna is tuned for 20 meters, all I have to do is remove it and screw this in, and I'm actually on 40 meters. It adds about 6 foot, no, not even that much. It adds maybe, I'd say 4 foot to the length of the antenna, but gets me on 40 meters using just that right there and screwing this in. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about having a Yagi and a place to deploy a Yagi. Well, I'm working something different right now. So as I said, I can run this spider beam with the antenna tuner. I can run a 20 meters at a half wave. Well, I had initially set up a parasitic reflector for 20 meters, and it's set up right over here. So what I have here, I have another antenna. It's a quarter wavelength away, quarter wavelength at 20 meters away from that one. It is tuned with radials at 13.97 megahertz. I have 8 radials laying on the ground. Once I got that tuned, I strapped the center conductor and the shield of the connector together so that the radials and the vertical element were connected. Now, what I have the ability to do is to use this antenna right here, either the telescopic whip, or what works even better is the halfway tune. What you're essentially doing is base loading the spider beam, the 40 meter quarter wave spider beam wire that's on the spider beam. You're base loading it to work as a half wave on 20 meters with antenna tuner. When I do that in association with the parasitic vertical a quarter wavelength away, I'm seeing about 6 dB of gain toward the northeast from me. So I'm picking up Europe like gangbusters, and the Southwest and South America have just dropped off. I don't pick them up anymore. So that's about everything I've got to show on the antennas. But this gets us back to our original question: what antenna do you need? What antenna does a person need to work HF? Well, it depends. What are you trying to do? What do you have room for? How high can you get it? And what's your goal? Do you want to work DX, or you want to work within a 500 to 1,000 miles? Because it makes a difference. And again, you can go look at my my video on antenna gain, and I explain a lot of that. So I hope this has been helpful to somebody. I know that if I had seen a video with this information, it would have helped me out. But anybody that's got anything else they would like to put in and contribute, just add it to the comments. It's appreciated. If you think this will help somebody, share it. If you're not a subscriber of the channel, please consider subscribing. And until the next video, take it easy, 7-3, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.